Despite fairly strong sales, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon would be the last game in the series to receive a Western release for 4 very long and frightening years. During this time, the series' fate outside of Japan was very uncertain. On July 15, 2010, the 12th entry of the Fire Emblem series was released in Japan, which was Fire Emblem Shin Mazo no Nazo Hikari to Kaga no Iu, or Fire Emblem New Mystery of the Emblem Heroes of Light and Shadow. This was another remake for the DS in the vein of Shadow Dragon, which remade the third game of the series and served as a direct sequel to the events in Shadow Dragon. For reasons unknown, Nintendo never gave this game a worldwide release, but a dedicated group of fans saw fit to translate this game themselves. So on November 21st, 2012, the English patch released and Fire Emblem fans finally got to experience this brand new title. I only mention this ill-fated game because it introduced a rather important feature: character creation. Heroes of Light and Shadow introduced the My Unit feature, which allows players to create their own character, dictating their appearance and backstory. However, this player avatar's personality is predetermined. But to get back on topic, it's important to note that Fire Emblem Awakening, the 13th game of the series, had been released in Japan since April of 2012. It wasn't until later that year at E3 that a Western release was announced. The game released in the Western market on February 4th, 2013 for the Nintendo 3DS. This was it. Fire Emblem Awakening would be the final game of the entire series if the game didn't perform well enough, and by the gods, this game completely blew away every expectation Nintendo and Intelligent Systems had. In almost no time at all, Awakening became the best-selling game of the entire series. So, is Awakening the swan song of the Fire Emblem series like nearly every critic made it out to be? Or is this game overrated, only catering to newcomers? Well, today at long last I shall answer this question, and yes, sorry for the long wait everyone. Fire Emblem Awakening once again takes place on the continent of Arcania, making it a sequel to both Shadow Dragon and Heroes of Light and Shadow, although Awakening takes place thousands of years later. As such, various countries, kingdoms, and even the geography of Arcania has changed drastically. The only elements that really connect these three games are Marth, the Falchion, the Holy Dragon Naga, and the Fire Emblem itself. The game begins in a character creation screen much like the one in Heroes of Light and Shadow I mentioned just earlier. This character can be named whatever you wish, the default being Robin, and this player avatar can be male or female. You can also decide their birthday as well as this character's best and worst stat, although Robin is pretty much guaranteed to be one of your most powerful units regardless. Shortly after, you are treated to a beautiful looking CG cutscene depicting a battle between Chrom, Marth's descendant, and an evil sorcerer named Valadir. Afterwards, your newly created character and Chrom team up to defeat this villain. Another cutscene plays out immediately after, showing Robin supposedly killing Chrom. Just right after, Robin is awakened by Chrom and his younger sister Lisa, apparently meeting for the first time. Robin is suffering from a nasty case of unoriginal JRPG cliché, or in other words, amnesia. It doesn't take long before Robin joins Chrom's army, the Shepherds, and begins serving as their tactician. From here, our group of heroes will be pitted against a crazed king, an invading nation from another continent, and even an army of the undead called the Risen. As much as I'd like to go into more depth with this story, I'm gonna stop the synopsis here, as I'd end up spoiling what little there is to this plot. As much as it pains me to say this, in my opinion, Fire Emblem Awakening has one of the weakest stories of the entire series, and that is especially disappointing because there's a lot going for this story. From time travel to the invading nation plotline and even Robin's past, there was a lot of interesting plot points that end up becoming simply underwhelming thanks to how predictable the overall story is. It's even a greater shame as this is arguably one of the best presented stories in this series. Instead of the talking portraits seen in most Fire Emblem games, Awakening actually has cutscenes using the in-game character models, and other story scenes are told in very beautiful CG cutscenes. Despite the presentation, the story suffers from having an incredibly weak and generic villains, as well as incredibly lame story reveals that usually don't amount to much. As a whole, Awakening's story isn't up to series standards. It's serviceable, but far from great. This really disappointed me as the overall cutscenes are very well presented and there are a few truly mesmerizing moments in the story, like the events of Chapter 10, which was an incredibly emotional chapter that features the death of a very important plot-relevant character, and a group of enemies who are unwilling to fight you but are forced to fight regardless, combined with a beautiful piece of music that accompanied the chapter made it stand out from every other. But sadly, there aren't enough moments like that to save this ultimately predictable and cliched plot. Something I thought I would never thought I would miss were the brief descriptions and plot details that occur before each chapter. Every preceding game in the series featured them, and these brief explanations provide context and a sense for why each battle was being fought and why it mattered. Since Awakening doesn't have these, many battles don't really seem to be very important, and outside of Ylisse, none of the other kingdoms and locations are given much of a backstory or any information at all, outside of some brief character dialogue. Luckily, the game's narrative does have a saving grace: the characters. Like the other Fire Emblem games, Awakening's characters are going to be your main attachment with the game world, and Awakening features some of the best written characters in all of the series. The localization for Fire Emblem Awakening is rather incredible, as character dialogue is excellent, providing each character with their own distinct quirks, dialects, and traits. What really sets this cast apart from previous games' groups of characters are their support conversations and the new revamped support system, which are debatably the best they have ever been. One thing going for this game is the sheer amount of support conversations, which provide ample opportunities to develop each character, and best of all, you can have as many supports as you want. The one character that truly surprised me was the player avatar Robin. Being a player-created character, I was really concerned that Robin would be as boring as the previous player unit in Heroes of Shadow and Light, but was I ever wrong? Robin actually has a really fleshed out personality, like many of the other characters, and depending on Robin's sex, he or she will have different conversations and dialogue throughout the game. I always appreciate attention to detail like that. My only real nitpick with the game's characters and the support conversations is that many of these conversations are played up for laughs more than anything else, which I don't have a particular problem with, but I would have preferred a better mix of serious conversations and the many humorous ones, although it should be noted that I did enjoy reading over all of them, even the ones that made my eyes roll a bit. So the overall story is lacking, but thanks to some powerful moments and another great group of characters almost make up for the narrative shortcomings. But the story could have been something truly great. Instead, what we got is only okay. Thankfully, Fire Emblem Awakening has some of the best gameplay in the entire series. The one thing most people have probably heard about this game is that it's the most accessible entry in the series, and that is indeed true. Awakening, for the first time ever, has the option to turn off permanent character death if you decide to play in casual mode, but if you want the traditional permadeath gameplay, you'll have classic mode. The game has 4 different difficulty settings: normal, which starts off ridiculously easy and doesn't really get challenging until later on; hard mode, similar to playing through Radiant Dawn with the game dropping its tutorial and starts off fairly difficult, but gets easier the further you get as you catch up to your enemies' levels. There's also Lunatic and Lunatic Plus, but honestly, I wouldn't recommend playing the game on those difficulties. Fire Emblem Awakening can best be described as the true successor to Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones, as they share many gameplay similarities, primarily the world map. Like the Sacred Stones, on the world map you can freely visit shops, armories, and engage roaming enemies for some extra experience, something you may find yourselves doing quite a bit. Outside of these options, the world map also allows you to access various paralog chapters, in which typically involve recruiting new characters. Think of these as guidance chapters. Also, if you happen to street pass another person playing the game, you can interact with their avatar, which you can then trade or battle with them, and if you win, you can even recruit their player character. You can also do this with characters from previous Fire Emblem games, which I felt was a nice throwback, although you'll most likely never really use them in battle. There's also the Outrealm Gate, which allows you to access various DLC maps which will pit you against a variety of characters from all sorts of previous Fire Emblem games. And once again, if you win, you can recruit certain characters and gain items that grant you access to new classes as well as some skills. The majority of these maps aren't really worth their price, although there are a couple ones definitely worth playing, like the beach episode, which contains the infamous censored shot of fan favorite Tharja, and the What If scenario that contains a side campaign with an actual story to it. The other maps aren't really worth mention, but if you plan on playing through Awakening on anything higher than the hard difficulty, I'd recommend considering picking up the grind maps, Exponential Growth, and the Golden Gaff, which only exist for earning easy experience and gold. Now, the actual minute-to-minute gameplay is largely familiar, but there are some differences, the first of which is the emission of a magic triangle and rescuing. Well, kind of. Instead of one unit grabbing another and receiving lowered stats, a new pair-up system has been introduced in its place. By having 2 units next to one another, they'll receive various bonuses depending on their support rank, and they can block hits for one another as well as attack enemies. If you use the new pair command, the two units will act as one, essentially becoming a super unit, with the lead unit taking the hits and moving. But aside from gaining all those bonuses I just mentioned, the leading unit will also gain a variety of stat bonuses, which is dictated by their paired partner. But this new pair system is the crux of Awakening's gameplay, and is absolutely mandatory if you plan on playing on some of the higher difficulties. This system goes hand in hand with the support system, as each time paired units fight, it will increase their support and eventually their support rank. Awakening also brings back a feature only ever seen in the fourth game of the series, Fire Emblem Seisen no Keifu, or Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War, this feature being character marriage. So kids, if a man and a woman have an A rank support and they continuously fight alongside one another, they can achieve an S rank support, which typically results in the two getting married and resulting in their child being able to be recruited. This is easily the most addictive feature of the entire game. Each female unit has a predetermined child, with aspects of this kid's appearance and base class as well as their skills being based on their parents. Typically, the stronger and higher level the parents, the more powerful their children will be. So to make the best possible units out of these children involves a lot of grinding, and through the right combination of parents and skills, these children can become absolute monsters on the battlefield. In fact, many of these children units can easily clear through the maps on their own. Something I've neglected to mention until this point is class promotion and reclassing. Similarly to the Sacred Stones, upon promotion you can choose between two classes to promote to, and like Shadow Dragon, you can change the classes of your units. Unlike Shadow Dragon, you need an item to reclass called a second seal. Using a second seal allows you to choose a class to change to, with certain units having access to different ones to change to. But upon changing classes, your unit will retain most of their stats and skills, with the unit starting again from level 1. This reclassing system is the fundamental aspect of most of the game's grinding, which is nearly mandatory on the hard difficulty or higher, especially if you want to create some game-destroying children. And this is one of several reasons that Awakening is easily the least balanced game in the entire series, especially on the Lunatic and Lunatic Plus difficulties. I found Normal stupidly easy, and I actually only ever played it for the purpose of this review. Although Hard starts off unforgiving, I found it to be the best balance of the difficulty settings. Then there's Lunatic and Lunatic Plus, which honest to God made me realize that Awakening isn't as well designed as I initially first thought. In previous games, on higher difficulty settings, enemies would act either more intelligently, have different weapon loadouts, and sometimes even have different placement, which made the game more challenging while still being fair, and it challenged players to adapt. Playing Fire Emblem Awakening on anything higher than hard isn't just not fun, it's completely unfair. On the Lunatic difficulty setting, instead of using any of the methods I just listed, the game instead just makes the enemies substantially stronger. In fact, enemies are so strong that the only way to win is to grind and reclass like I described earlier. This problem is even worse on Lunatic Plus, as enemies now have random assortment of skills that, depending if they have the right combination, can make certain chapters unwinnable, and the only way to have a chance at winning is to restart your system until they have the right combination of skills. I would only recommend playing on normal if you aren't familiar with Fire Emblem or strategy RPGs. If you're like me and have played almost every other entry, I would recommend sticking to the hard difficulty setting. Having personally played Lunatic all the way through, I'd say it really wasn't worth it. I didn't feel satisfied upon each victory, and the most efficient way to win was to grind and exploit cheap skill sets, which sucked all the fun out of the game for me. Playing on Lunatic also made me realize that the map designs are rather weak in Awakening, especially compared to the other games in the series. Most maps are just simple large spaces with very little going on, the worst design choice being how on hard and above, enemy and reinforcements spawn and attack on the same turn, which results in many cheap character deaths. Now, let's take a moment to talk about the game's visuals. Outside of its breathtaking presentation, Awakening features some of the best graphics on the system. Well, maybe not necessarily the actual in-game models. Don't misunderstand, the graphics are good, but the models suffer from a little bit of pixelation and the fact that every character's 3D model doesn't have any feet. The biggest change visually is the character designs, all of which have been created by Yosuke Kozaki of No More Heroes fame. Many longtime fans had issues on how different these characters looked from previous games' character designs, but honestly, I kinda like the new direction. It made Awakening feel fresh, but having said that, I absolutely hate many of the redesigns of older characters, many of just which look awful. The actual in-game model designs do look great, and best of all make each character feel distinct. The map visuals use sprites which are evocative of past games and look rather striking. It should also be said that the game looks great in 3D, with many maps featuring beautiful weather effects, as well the extra depth does make battle animations look all the more cooler. The battle animations are also very well done and are exciting to watch. As well, they're very customizable. By holding A, battles will play at double their speed. Plus, you can mess around with the camera and even see the battles through the eyes of a character. The CG cutscenes are absolutely gorgeous and are quite possibly some of the best use of 3D animation I've ever seen. Simply put, the game's visuals are very strong. The music in Fire Emblem Awakening is absolutely incredible. Words fail me in describing just how amazing the game's soundtrack is. From remixes of classic songs to brand new, beautifully orchestrated pieces, each song is absolute ear candy. The only thing notable to say about Awakening's audio is the voice acting. In particular, the CG cutscenes are fully voiced. The game features both Japanese and English dubs, with both being quite good. Yet despite that, the actual in-game cutscenes use very small voice quips and grunts, which gets old very fast. Sadly, this is my only complaint I have about the game's audio. It's a shame too, as the game's strong dubs were only used in the CG cutscenes. I know most of this review has been rather ranty and nitpicky, but I do it out of love. The truth is, I absolutely adore this game. Fire Emblem Awakening is one of the most fun entries in the entire series, thanks to its revamped support system and the marriage/children system. Pairing up with different units using different skills and classes made Awakening highly replayable and simply a damn fun experience. As of this review, I've played through the game 7 different times. Now, I really do love this game, but I don't think it's quite as amazing as every critic says it is, especially when compared to other games of this series. While Awakening is definitely one of the best Fire Emblem games, its cliché and predictable story, as well as some of its unbalanced gameplay elements, hold it back from being the absolute best, but it's still up there. Thanks to the right combination of nostalgic throwbacks and new gameplay elements, Awakening is a rather refreshing strategy RPG that I'd recommend everyone with a 3DS try out, as in my opinion, it's still the best game on the system and the reason to own one. If you've never played an entry in this incredible game series, Fire Emblem Awakening is probably your best start. Well everyone, that concludes my Fire Emblem retrospective. I hope you enjoyed my coverage of the American-only games, and at some point in the future, I'd definitely like to take a look at some of the Japanese exclusive games of the series. And before anyone even asks, don't worry, I'll announce the next retrospective for the channel right here and now. So, as promised, I looked at what a lot of suggestions were, and general consensus seems like you guys want to see the Suikoden retrospective. So that's the next major project for the channel. Stay tuned for more, and as always, it's been Darren the Gaming Pilgrimage. Till next time. Well, this review took much longer than expected. I had camera failures and computer hard drive problems that prevented me from releasing this video in a timely manner, and I thank every single one of you watching for your patience. But this review would not have been possible if not for Yalorda, who allowed me to use footage from his channel of his playthrough of Fire Emblem Awakening. Yalorda, if you're watching, I cannot thank you enough. Here's a link to his playthrough of the game right here for anyone interested, and once again, dude, I can't thank you enough. The next manner of business is that this channel's reached over 1,000 subscribers, and I'm just simply blown away at how quickly things have been progressing over the past few months. I figured I'd need to do something in celebration of this great milestone. So, since I don't really have much to give away, I figured I'd do something a little different for this. As such, I've decided that I'll do a review of any single game requested by you guys. So in the comments section of this video, leave a suggestion for a game you'd like to see me review. And remember, this doesn't have to be a JRPG, it can be anything classified as a video game. I'll choose the game based on either popular demand, or I just may randomly choose one of the comments and go with that. I'll say the cutoff for this will be around September 13th, so no pressure. Anyways guys, thanks for all of your continued support, and it means the world to me. So, in the meantime, I better get cracking on this next retrospective.